I'm Commissioner Don Palmer with the EAC, and I'm here with a Zoom interview for you on the efforts of the Iowa Secretary of State, Paul Pate, and the Iowa National Guard during this period of COVID and dealing with election security issues. That relationship has been strengthened. And so my guests today are Secretary of State Paul Pate and Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Yazzie. And before we get started, I want to introduce them, give you their biographies. Iowa Secretary of State Pate has really dedicated his life to public service, and he is now in his third term as Iowa's Secretary of State. Among his other accomplishments in the office, Secretary Pate has worked to increase participation in Iowa elections by instituting online voter registration, and that has been a big lifeline to a number of folks virtually in this environment. More than 100,000 Iowans have utilized the system in just its first 3 years, and more than 250,000 have newly registered to the rolls since 2018. Secretary Pate is also the current president of the National Association of Secretaries of State, an organization that sort of brings those secretaries on both sides of the aisles together. Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Yazzie is the commander of the 168th Cyberspace Operations Squadron in Des Moines, Iowa. He took command of that squadron in 2015. Colonel Yazzie is an outstanding leader with 18 years of experience in information technology and manufacturing for the Air Force and 2 Fortune 500 companies. So I guess my first question is and I'll probably start with Secretary Pate. Could you talk a little bit about how the National Guard has sort of played a role with your office and in the recent primary, and how have they assisted you and your local election officials?
Well, I've got to say, it really started several years ago now when we were looking for help in partnering with on the cyber front, and that I point that out because that put us ahead of the game, because it encouraged us to develop a relationship with the command structure of the Guard and working with the governor's office, of course, to identify how they might be able to help us with all the expertise they have on board. And that's how I got to meet the Lieutenant Colonel here, was through the cyber side of things. And that rapport being built and helping us with a lot of components put us where we were needed to be for the COVID and dealing with our June 2nd primary. When we were looking for a distribution method for all these safety products to get to 99 counties, when you start talking about several thousand gallons of this hand sanitizer products and the face shields, thousands of face shields and masks and all the full array of supplies, we were looking at how we're going to get this to all of these counties in a very short window, because this was not something that happened months in advance. We were literally doing it on the fly, getting ready for a June 2nd primary, and the Guard was our first thought. Between them and our Iowa Emergency Management organization, because they have a natural system, if you will, because of their distribution around the state, and they stepped up and were crucial in how we're going to get these shipped. And we told them where it had to go, and they told us how they're going to get it done. and believe it, and they got it done, and that's pretty impressive.
Colonel Yazzie, could you talk a little bit about your activities with the cyber, defending the networks, working with the Secretary of State's office, and then perhaps talk about some of the logistics of how you helped locals with distributing PPE?
Definitely, I'll kind of stick to primarily my subject matter expertise being in cybersecurity, but holistically, the Iowa National Guard has had a huge partnership with the state of Iowa's government entities. And I think this really began much earlier before my unit stood up. And Secretary Pate kind of talked to the previous work that we've done to get to the point that we're at today. The state developed a cybersecurity strategy in 2016, identifying several organizations, the Iowa National Guard being one of them, to determine what is our key area that we'll focus on to defend against cyber attacks, against cyber incidents. Secretary Pate was very beneficial to understanding the need for partnerships, whether it's information sharing, whether it was determining what is the risk that my infrastructure will be imposed upon, and utilizing some of the best resources out there, whether it's civilian entities that help them, but really looking at the Iowa National Guard as we stood up a brand new unit. We were able to support in 2018 midterms at that time period. We were able to update our cybersecurity strategy for the state in 2019. That was leading to a lot of memorandum agreements, assessment planning, a lot of the legal boundaries that were prohibiting us in the past. Secretary Pate was able to work with our Adjutant General to kind of work through those building blocks and identifying, here's exactly what it would look like for a state active duty airman and soldier to defend the election infrastructure. And here's how we're going to get to that. We're going to work with Cyber Command, DHS. We're going to sponsor top security clearances that we have federally. We're going to do that on a state level. And then we're going to make sure we share information across and just going back to the primaries, literally across the wall. We were set up at the Lucas building. Secretary Pate saw our members. It was a great aspect to not only see how we train, but actually work that training aspect and on a real world event like the elections has been incredible. We have thousands of airmen and soldiers that are providing efforts for the state. And PPE is one of those aspects, developing regional hospitals so members can be tested immediately, providing, as Secretary Pate mentioned, how do we get sanitization, PPE structures to all those counties? Yes, very critical to what we do, but we're able to exercise over the last several years, not only in cyber, but also how we work with transportation, how we work with wastewater, everything down to every critical asset in the state. We've been able to exercise with one another. Partnerships are huge, and Secretary Pate's been beneficial to making sure we're successful.
Well, great. Secretary Pate, when we think about what the National Guard can help you with, is it sort of like those systems that are online, like online voter registration? We talked about that earlier, or absentee requests. Is that the type of activity that the National Guard helps you protect? Is your role as Secretary of State?
I want to tell you, there's a lot more things than you might think. When we started out, that's what our goal was. We wanted some cyber expertise on looking at some really important things, like one of them is our website. You know, the fact we wanted to make sure it was totally secure. And not only ours at the Secretary of State's office, but as we look to the 99 counties and their websites, because you're only as good as your weakest point. And sitting down and having those dialogues, and as the Lieutenant Colonel talked about, we had to kind of navigate a lot of the government restrictions or guidelines to try to open up opportunities so we could work together on doing these things. And it's been very beneficial because we've looked at, as I said, everything from, yes, our online voter registration, but the websites are still continue to be a key factor. And anywhere we interface on the cyber side. And one other thing came out of this is it was a key component when we started putting all our partners together. I call it the A-team. And the Guard was where it started at because we wanted the Guard to be part of our structure. Well, then all of a sudden we go, well, we have a bigger list, not just the Guard. And when we started bringing these other players in, we realized we needed to know who they were. They needed to know who we were. We needed to have a better line of communication set up. And it was actually the Adjutant General who helped set up an exercise, a tabletop, where we all came to Camp Dodge and we sat down and all these partners and we walked through scenarios on how we ought to be interacting. That helped us develop a significant communication plan for all of our agencies so that we were ready. You've got to have a strong foundation. And with that in hand, we could start taking on anything really that came our way. And we've done that. We've made those calls, and I'll give Lieutenant Colonel credit and his team. They are very modest, but they really are there. And many times you don't even know they're there because they'll come in their civilian clothes and they're working out of our Lucas building. And I'm looking over, did I hire 4 more new staff? Who are these people over here, you know? And
I'll take it.
That's right. I'm going to grab them because they're really talented. But they're there for us as we had the June 2nd primary as an example. They were there on site, making sure as we were monitoring what was going on that day. And yeah, we had a couple incidences come up, and they weren't a real problem in the end, but they concerned us, and the guard team working with our own IT people and cyber people quickly dug into it and identified it wasn't a bad actor trying to do something. But when you're on election day, you don't want any surprises. So I'm very pleased with that. But when you start putting those people together on an election day, all in the same room, it's a good feeling to know you've got them all. But again, they've been very key in bringing a lot of partners together in not only our office, but because of when we started, they've done a series of outreaches to other agencies, just in general terms on cyber. So, as a state, we're trying to bring our agencies up to speed and doing what they need to do, and working with our OCIO office and our emergency management team. It truly is an A team. I can't underscore it enough. And the cyber is part of it. I'm kind of pleased that we're doing this conversation because, again, the Guard's pretty shy about all this. They really don't want to toot their own horn, and to some extent, we don't wish to people to think that the military is running elections, by no means at all. But they are offering us their assets and their resources so we can be successful. And we are in a tough situation with COVID, and whether it's cyber or whether it's the physical demands of getting safety products to the various parts of our state. We are glad we can count on them. And going into November's election, we know we've got our work cut out for us because the primary is kind of the off-Broadway performance. It was a smaller scale. We did it successfully in Iowa. We're pleased with that, but now we have to ramp up for the big one coming November. And I'm hinting to my Guard friends now, yeah, we'll be calling you back to talk about safety products and getting those things out there because they work so well that they'd like to see it happen again.
So, Lieutenant Colonel, you may have mentioned, if I heard correctly, that you actually do provide some support directly to localities. If that's the case, what sort of support does that look like? Because, obviously the state systems, they have their own networks and systems. Sometimes there's different avenues of connection with localities, but often they have their own IT infrastructure. Could you describe a little bit how you might support those if I heard you correctly?
Yes, I'll talk to that, but I really wanted, I love the point that Secretary Pate had mentioned before about the A team, and to kind of go back to that really briefly. One of the things that we had talked to in 2018 when we had that tabletop exercise of what is those scenarios that keep us up at night. If you're thinking about just a insider threat, maybe some local teenager doing script kiddie type of work, all the way to an advanced persistent threat, the Russia, China, North Korea, it's not going to be one entity defending their network. It's going to be a whole of government. It's going to be a nation versus a nation. And I really like that Secretary Pate recognized that with the Iowa National Guard, as well as other entities that he had identified. We're going to defend democracy. We're going to defend what we do, not just by one-on-one. You're standing alone by yourself in a field. No, we're going to stand arm in arm to kind of get after those events, whether it's in how do you ensure health, safety, and the citizens of Iowa, or if it's going to be on our critical network. So I really do make sure that we talk in any forum that we are here to support, and that support is not just by a one person or one entity. The Iowa National Guard is a team in doing this out of the state of Iowa. But to your second question, or to the bigger question of how do you provide the support? We have 99 counties. We have several different organizations within different branches of government. It's impossible to go every single area. When we came on early in 2018, we sat down, and Secretary Pate's office was great in getting every single state and county on board to have these meetings. And in those meetings, they were identifying what are those LIMPACs. Some offices had 2 computers that they did a lot of their ingestion of data before it was sent back to the Secretary of State's platform. And a lot of them were dual rolled. And then some counties actually had the opportunity of having IT cybersecurity experts. You had a wide range of support. But early on, they identified, here's our least common denominator. What do you think, Iowa National Guard? Where do we sit with your expertise federally, state? We also work with nation state entities overseas in doing this cybersecurity job. We easily pointed to, we need to have two-factor authentication. We need to have more tabletop exercise for information sharing. We need to ensure that we have agreements that are able to take off the counter and be able to be input in within days and not weeks and months. We came up with a lot of those early on action plans that are implemented today. So what we did for the individual states, we're able to identify their issues very early. The Secretary of State's office was able to identify, here's the money it's going to cost, and reach federally out to find out, how do I close those gaps? We were there just to provide our subject matter expertise. We didn't provide any technical support down to one particular entity, but just holistically as a whole, we were able to provide that support. And it did come down to something very technical, to encryption or how you do particular tasks. But then it was much more holistically of how do we share information? And that was a big area where we had to tackle.
Secretary Pate, just listening to Lieutenant Colonel Yazzie talk about sort of the assessments that he did, were some of the security funds of the HAVA security funds and some of the, obviously there's been money invested by the government of Iowa. Were those monies able to sort of assist the counties and the state in sort of upgrading some of their cyber defenses?
Well, certainly, and we've been very successful at leveraging the support we've gotten from the federal government, whether it was the HAVA money that came to our office or even our OCO office, because they were offering a series of, nothing's free in the world, but it was being paid for through these federal grants. So these counties didn't have to put any money into it, really. It was about time and commitment. And the Guard helped us in, as he said, in looking at the big picture and how we were going to break this down and how we prioritize it. And my own cyber staff then would work on the ground, if you will, with these counties to make sure, all right, look, all your websites need to be protected. We want to see your certificates. We want you to make sure that you have looked at the computer situation, that we're not sharing the usage of it for elections. The whole list of things that we should be doing so that we're secure as we can be. And that checklist was that we were able to accomplish all that through the federal dollars we had, because what costs might be associated with it, we were able to defray it with that. And we're continuing to do that. We've offered a pretty strong incentive to the counties to make some conversions over the next year or so, to the tune of about $1 million. If they do those, we'll reimburse them for the costs. But I want all 99 counties to do it. That's the secret here, because again, the weakest link, if we leave one open or two and that lets them get through, when we are back where we were at, we have a problem. I also want to underscore, it was, I think it was 2, maybe 3 years ago, I can't keep the time straight, but I had an opportunity to speak with a meeting at the National Governors and the National Guard in Washington, D.C. And our Adjutant General was there and I was there. There were several states, I think we had about 3 or 4 states representing the Guard on cyber. And one of the challenges, because of those of you who are watching this, is not all states have cyber teams. And Colonel, you can jump in if I'm misspeaking here. So if you're watching this and all of a sudden you get on the phone, you call your Adjutant General and want to know why you haven't got this, don't be too hard on them. It's really based on, remember how the Guard is made up. We have, these are citizen soldiers. These are people who have other lives. So it helps when you have a base to draw on. And I use my state of Washington as an example. When you have Boeing sitting there and you have all these engineers who work in that realm, they've got a pretty strong cyber presence in that. Iowa is one of those states that's done very well too, but there are not 50 of them out there. I point that out. So we're very pleased that we've got one here in Iowa, and we're proud of that. And it's helped us stay ahead of the curve on a lot of these things. But I believe there's a strong movement on the national level with the Guard to try to develop more of what this could mean for the Guard, and they're partnering with states on elections. I knew there was actually the former adjutant general was leading a study on that, and I didn't hear if the report was done, so maybe the colonel knows, but there's a lot of push so that the Guard knows how they fit into this, because this is a new area working in elections for them as well. And it's one thing to deliver safety supplies, but when you start getting into the cyber area and you're interfacing with a lot of other agencies, that's much more complicated. And I appreciate that they're doing, but it's not something that happens overnight. And it's you have to start from the beginning and build that foundation. So that's my 2 cents. And Colonel, if you want to clarify anything I just said, so I didn't get you into hot water.
No, you're exactly right, Secretary Pate. What's unique in the Air National Guard as well as the Army National Guard, the Air National Guard has 12 DCO, Defensive Cyber Operations Unit, that federally work for U.S. Cyber Command. They have 3. Air National Guard has 3 offensive cyber operations units that work out of Fort Meade in Maryland. The state of Iowa happens to have, which is truly, as Secretary Pate mentioned, we have a incredible insurance infrastructure here in Des Moines. We have great cooperation with Iowa State, who's leading cutting edge, just like as similar to back east and back west to a lot of the IT infrastructure. We have a huge presence here in the Midwest for IT capability and cybersecurity. So we're able to recruit, retain, and educate airmen into this career field and keep them moving forward. But the Guard is working to increase that capability, so more states have the opportunity to utilize airmen and soldiers as we are in the state of Iowa. So you're exactly right, Secretary Pate. We are very unique from that standpoint, but we also are very unique in other areas, having a all fiber network called the Iowa Communication Network that's a backbone throughout the state of Iowa. If there's a fail safe or something, we have a reach back to be able to communicate with one another that's dedicated solely for the state of Iowa. There's, as I mentioned, there's state partnerships with Mid-America Energy that we gain cooperation on understanding ICS SCADA. There's a lot of partnerships in Iowa, and the Midwest mentality of working with one another has made us one of the top states of working in this particular career field.
So it sounds like Secretary Pate and Lieutenant Colonel Yazzie that the development of a relationship is really the first step here and the most important. Mm-hmm. And so this is usually going to come through the state. And so could you just describe maybe a recommendation or two on how to develop that relationship, both from a cyber and other perspective, because I think that's important for those that may be viewing right. and understanding the relationship.
The first step is to have a conversation with your governor because of the Guard structure, and the governor is the commander in chief of your state's Guard. Have that conversation with your governor to get that commitment from them. And I think most governors would be very receptive, but you need to have that. Usually there's a letter of agreement that is designed to give the authority to the Guard to be able to work with the secretaries or whatever agency you're talking about. And then whatever structure you maybe already have in place, you would bring them together with the Guard and start having those dialogues. The first step is just getting them all in the room together and be fair about it, and catching people up on where you're at. That took a while because we want to, it's one thing for us to talk cyber, but you need to understand elections and what pieces of it are so crucial. So we were very fortunate that in our case, the Guard made the time commitment to allow their people to do these things. And then I think, as I said earlier, when you start doing the tabletop exercises, frankly, I wrote a note to myself, we need to do another one here soon because they're so valuable. Why wait till the crisis is upon you or the challenge is upon you? But doing that tabletop with the Guard, they help facilitate, but they were also a part of it with our partners and these other agencies, and identifying, all right, what can they offer us to do? And then frankly, that's what the other agencies need to do. And then, so we aren't duplicating it, which one would be the lead on some of these challenges. And you need to know what the limitations are, their comfort level. How far can I go? And I go, no, this is not an area we want to get into, but we can help you up to a certain point. Those are important. You have to know those limitations going forward. But the side benefits we came out of this is just like any other thing. I call it the coffee break. When you go to a conference, you have these great speakers. So quite often we learn more at the break when you're standing over having coffee and chatting with your peers. That's what we were getting out of these conversations with the Guard and these other agencies when we were together, because we were having these informal conversations and knowing, oh, I didn't realize that. And that's not just unique to Iowa. I mean, I experienced the same thing as a Secretary of State. First time I came into Homeland Security, and we had a meeting with all the partners on the federal level. Most of them hadn't met each other yet. When we first started this, they were exchanging business cards going, oh, okay, so you're my FBI liaison. So you're my liaison over here. So that was what we had to do. We spent a significant amount of time doing that. It was several months. We had to develop that before we could go forward on what we wanted them to help us with, or what they're willing to help us with. Because when it first started, our first goal was we were going to ask the Guard to go to every single one of our counties and sit down and help our county auditors do a review internally and set everything up and do it all. That was our ask, if you will. And it turned out that wasn't something that was a fit for the Guard, but they were able to help us develop a plan to get it done. And that was a win. So that's kind of the direction I see it, but it's a commitment from whether it's the Secretary of State or the chairman of your elections board or whoever the head of your elections are in your state. It's a commitment from them, the governor, getting the adjutant general on board of your state, if you're using the Guard, for an example. And with that commitment, giving the support to the players, people like the colonel and others, so that they know they have the backing of their superiors when they're doing these tasks. And, it doesn't hurt once in a while to say thank you. We recognized the National Guard a little over a year ago with what we call our NAS Medallion Award, which is National Association of Secretaries of State, because they played a really significant role in 2018. And those are very special recognitions. There's a limited amount of those given out in the country. And we felt that the Guard had risen to that level, and we wanted to thank them. And you can't say thank you enough to all the players when it comes to elections.
Lieutenant Colonel Yazzie, did you want to weigh in on that question? I have another one for you.
Yeah. No, I definitely do. Thank you for the opportunity. Secretary Pate lined out perfectly where it starts. It starts from whatever state agency, Secretary of State's office to the governor's office. So that crawl, walk, run strategy is important, and really identifying those documents that will push you over those hurdles. For example, developing a state cybersecurity strategy that went into an incident response strategy for the state that had the Iowa National Guard provide a cyber annex, and actually how we were going to have right and left limits of our capability. Left being, we can over the shoulder and talk with you about here's items that would improve your cybersecurity posture in action plans and priorities, all the way to far right, what we're doing. And what we did during the primaries of, we added equipment to the network that was ingesting data passively, and we were able to interact with it to determine what is the indicators of compromise, what are those alerts that we need to go and take a look at, and how do we provide that information back to the Secretary of State's cybersecurity team so they can go and mitigate those steps in a very fast and expedient manner. So going from far left of hands off to touching ones and zeros is important, that you have the memorandum of agreements, that you do have that leadership's buy-in from their signatures. It was a great way in which we've executed the support. And I definitely think it's benchmark work that we've done to kind of get to this level, and I'm excited to continue it.
So I wanted to take this opportunity to ask you a question that I sort of felt when I first, Secretary Pate mentioned meeting with a bunch of the federal partners and some of the three-letter agencies that help us gather information. And I was a former intelligence officer and all that. But I think that the common voter doesn't have any understanding of really maybe what the threat is, or that so many agencies are working together to defend our country. And so you were in a perfect position this morning to tell me tell the audience who in the federal government and the National Guard and the military are working to defend our country? How do you do it? And then I'll let Secretary of State Pate weigh in, because, obviously the states play such a huge role in sort of organizing from an election perspective. But I want to give you the opportunity first to talk about what do you do with your federal and state partners to defend our networks against bad actors who are trying to sort of mess with us, from an election perspective, and that sort of thing.
Well, thank you. First thing, what we've done over the last several years is adjusted our strategy from a right of boom, an incident happens and we respond to it, to now we are actually being prepared for it. We are working much more upstream, and what we do upstream is working with the entities that you put out there, DHS. You have an electoral ISAC, an information sharing analysis center that actually provides information on the government side that we work with. They work on their operational floor with the Department of Defense through U.S. Cyber Command. That information goes, I get that on both sides. So I'll get that from my federal hat, which federally part of my unit's mission stance. We have up to top secret clearances working in a secure SCIFT facility. We go out and we reach DHS and ask for a sponsorship to utilize our clearances at the local level in a state active duty status, to utilize these clearances. So we're able to take very high level information that's provided in those entities and those arenas, bringing them down to an unclassified level, just an IP, a single IP that doesn't give you any background to what that information is, doesn't tell you who it's attributed to, but we're able to put that information into our collection platforms and determine if we're going to get a hit on that actual information, and how do we respond if we do. So those type of information sharing agreements are in place. There's templates for those, and Secretary Pate, working with his offices, he actually has a secret clearance that he can utilize and come to my area if we're going through that and something truly was impacted and that needs to be responded to. Having those certain members that have the ability to have a higher level clearance, that's really what it's going to take, a whole of government. If we're going to be attacked by an advanced threat, having all of us come together in the intelligence community to provide the information to those local defenders in Secretary Pate's office and to teams like myself that are there supporting the primary and the general elections. That's what it takes to defend our nation, defend our democracy.
Secretary Pate, did you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I think the Colonel said it very well, but when we're looking at these partners, we joke about the alphabet soup because there's a lot of acronyms here and all that, but the key thing that goes between all of them now that we've learned from the cyber issue that has helped us deal with the COVID is developing relationships and having the right contact and getting a clear line of communication. When I say clear line of communication, it isn't just about knowing who to talk to, it's also to be talking the same language. We spent a long time on that, and EAC, you were very helpful in that arena, our own National Association of Secretary of States, in talking to the federal agencies about, you need to learn elections language, because when you say words like hack, that's pretty, in our book, that's pretty serious talk. So let's make sure we're on the same line of how we use these words even. And that took some time in our conversations and expectations of what each agency can do. But whether it's the FBI, whether it's our local law enforcement, whether it's the ISAC, as was mentioned, the ability to do information sharing is huge, huge. We're talking instantaneously. We can see everything that's going on in the country when it comes to any kind of movement in the elections game. So we can quickly determine if there's a trend. Is it going to come our way? So as the Colonel said, we want to be upstream. We want to be upstream. We want to be ahead of it before it comes to us. And that has been so important. And that's probably the biggest success I can say we've had collectively with all the agencies working together. We got room to grow and improve? Yes, we do. Because, people change. We have different people come in and out of office or different agencies. We also discover that we have different challenges and how we partner up and get the job done. And we face some new challenges from time to time. I don't think any of us here would have expected something like COVID-19 several months back. This was nowhere on my radar, at least. We've dealt with tornadoes and fires and civil unrest or things like that, but this was a major thing that came about. And then, if you're dealing with that, you can't take your eye off the ball on the cyber side. And I can tell you from our national organization standpoint as secretaries and commissioners of elections, we were just totally absorbed on the cyber front for the last 2.5, 3 years, at least right after the 2016 election. Everybody was into it. That was all we talked about. Well, guess what? We've been talking about now for the last 6 months, COVID-19. Doesn't mean cyber is not important. So we have to keep our eye on that ball all the time. And these agencies and partnering with them has helped us get it done. I can't say enough for that. Even on the June 2nd primary, when we're monitoring all these numbers, and I am not an IT expert, but I walk in and I see the screen up in our little control room, and I see some numbers that are getting really high. I'm quickly turning to whether it's the guard people or my own cyber people saying, is that good? It doesn't look good to me. And when I see them scratch their head and they're on the phone or they're dealing with it, then I know we got something we're checking out and making sure that we're staying, like I said, upstream and ahead of the problem. So that's what these agencies have helped us and the success over the last few years. This particular conversation we're having here today, if this helps anybody out there who's viewing this to understand the importance of having that dialogue and that these other agencies are receptive to doing it. We just need to get on the same page, if you will, and speak the same language. We can be successful at it.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for your discussion today, and I really hope that this is helpful to other states as they develop their relationship with the National Guard. And there's a plethora of news stories that have been talking about that relationship. As you guys prepare for November, good luck with that. I'll leave it with this. If there's any final words, I mean, I think that you've already talked about the importance of communication and develop of a relationship. I'll give you one last chance. If there's any final words that you had for a local or a state official out there that may be watching or other person and how they can develop that relationship or improve security.
Thank you. I'll kind of start, Secretary Pate, if you don't mind. I'll let you have the last word. The first thing for the Iowa National Guard, and there's a lot of concern when it comes to the actual expertise in some cases. We are built of 30% full-time members. I'm a full-time member with the Iowa National Guard, and 70% from our local, state, and tribal territories throughout the Midwest. I have members traveling in even from Colorado. They do this full-time on their outside. So they're penetration testers, they're engineers, they work for Pioneer in quality assurance on the engineering side. There's a lot of capability with the Iowa National Guard. Please don't be scared away by the uniform. When you think through some of the monologues of how you see our brute force of what we can do, think through the finesse that we're able to address certain issues that we're dealing with today. We are working through COVID and having to work on Zoom calls, having to work across the wire on the IT front. Building an actual connection from one building to another building takes time, takes work, and doing it with social distancing. It's incredible to see how a guardsman can work and take that expertise from their civilian employer and bring it to the military. I can't fund the training that comes from those members. So as you're thinking through, should I talk with my governor? Should I have a conversation with him? Please do. You'll be surprised who's working in this uniform. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to know that they have a lot of capability. Please utilize us. We're always willing to help. We serve, whether it's 2 days a month, 2 weeks a year, we're here to help. And I know people say that a lot, but we truly mean it to our core. We're guardsmen. We carry this militiaman concept. Federally, we'll go overseas and we'll defend this country. But for the homeland, we will defend our local community as well. And again, thank you for the opportunity for this interview. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Yazzie. Secretary Pate.
I think the idea of partnering is one that we all embrace. We just need to be more aggressive, as I said, and opening those lines of communication. And when we talk about cyber, so often we're thinking about somebody manipulating some kind of a record, potentially votes, etc. But really, it's more than that, far much more than that. It's about social media and the games that these bad actors are doing and trying to manipulate the public opinion on things. That's the real battlefront that I face as an elections professional right now. And anything that my partners can help me in that front is a great resource. Whether it's what we do with Trusted Info 2020 through the Secretaries of State, we want you to know where you can go to get the best source of information on accuracy. We want people to understand the transparency of elections, that their vote does get counted, and that we have a lot of safeguards in place to assure that integrity. And that's the battle for the cyber side. It's a battle for their minds as well. We want to make sure that people know that their elections in this country are still safe, and your vote will be counted. That's my message. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Secretary Pate. I'm really pleased I was able to sort of focus this on the relationship between the Iowa National Guard and the Secretary of State's office. Thank you very much for participating with that. We'll conclude. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.